Okay, so here we are,
Yeah.
we're recording. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Hello everyone. This is Marie Faulkner from Oracle Soul Talk. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Angela Kirby. Angela is a visionary artist and transpersonal therapist. And today she is going to talk to us about her journey and how she came to write her latest book. Angela, it is so nice to be with you today.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks for having me along. It's really great to be talking with you and sharing some time to talk about the work that I offer and maybe even a little bit about what you do too.
Yes, well, why not? And as you know, I think the world should know, you are currently in the Southern Hemisphere in Adelaide,
Yeah.
Australia, and here I am close to Ottawa, a capital of Canada, in a Northern Hemisphere where we're experiencing the cold weather.
Yeah.
So, although we are far apart today, we get to join. And yes, I'm so interested in hearing your story. I know you've had a spectacular journey that has brought you to this work. And I'd like us to start by let's go back a few years and tell us how you came to finding the material that inspired this book.
Well, I could go on for a year about this, Marie, but basically the material, I have been working as a visual artist since I was a kid, basically, but I suppose officially I was in my teens when I first started exhibiting and whatever. Then I went on to, I painted for many years, and I loved that, but that came to an end a few years ago, probably about 10 or so years ago. But you can't keep the artist down in me. And I wanted to, and a client actually gave me a beautiful piece of paper, 70 by 50, for example, approximately, or an A1, I'm not sure what you call the size, but piece of paper, and it had a really fine tooth on it, like an emery board. And she gave it to me as a gift. So, and I thought I'll just do a drawing of some sort. And I was right into drawing mandalas at that stage. I'd studied the transpersonal art therapy, and we'd spent a short amount of time on mandalas, and I'd fallen deeply in love with them because I found them profound in shape-shifting where I was or whatever the story. Anyway, so I started to draw a mandala on that piece of paper, and I just found that moment profound too, because rather than just a flat piece of paper, it could only hold a certain amount of the medium, okay? Whereas the this fine-toothed piece of paper could hold a lot. And I was using chalk pastels as opposed to the oil paints that I'd been using for years, of course. You just wouldn't use that on paper. Well, I don't think you would. Or you could. Anything's possible. But the fine, it could hold a lot of layers, and I could build up a lot of layers. And the fine, it would all sort of sprinkle down. You could see the drawings that I was doing, and as I was drawing, the leftover, the fallout would just come down to on the page, and it was quite amazing what the trails that it actually left. Anyway, so that was the beginning of the mandala journey. You were going to say something?
So, Angela, yes, I was going to say, I know that you have several mandalas that you've created over time, but for those who are listening today and aren't sure what you really mean by mandala, perhaps you can give us a visual and also explain the symbolism of the mandala.
Well, a mandala, a mandala is basically is a circle, and it loosely means mandala is actually a Sanskrit word, which is an ancient Indian language, and Jung, well, Carl Jung was the one who was who's important in bringing that way of being into the from the east to the west, so to speak. Or that's how it's spoken about. He himself went on his own personal journey with the mandalas on a daily basis, drawing a circle. He believed that whatever was ready to be drawn out of us, ready to be. What happened then?
Hello?
What happened then?
I don't know, I just got scooted off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, we'll just keep going. Yeah?
Okay, did it? Sure.
Okay, so Carl Jung, he managed to bring them, like he was doing it as a daily thing for himself, in a way of he was feeling quite unstable in his life, and he found that it helped him to stabilize, or to at least be able to work with what was going on in his inner world, to be able to draw that out of him. He also felt that it's a way of our soul wanting to reclaim itself within us, so to speak, or that's probably might be not the correct way of saying that, but it's more that he found that when we're wanting to heal spontaneously, we will create that healing body within a circle, within the mandala. And it's like even children are actually, babies are actually drawn to circles naturally, as opposed to squares or triangles or rectangles or whatever they might be. But yes, it's quite interesting. But the mandala for me is something that I have been doing. I've done thousands of them, but this particular, going back to the original question that you were saying, was that after drawing many of them, now I'm up to number 56, I felt quite a long time ago that what I needed to do was to record them, and I'd like to put them in a book, collate them, rather than just sitting on top of each other, just being framed or whatever they were meant to be. So, yeah.
So that's fascinating. You talked to us about the inner journey, and we know from reading your book that it's been most intense inner journey, and that this inner journey, all of us have access to take that on. Can you give us a sense of how others can relate to your inner journey, and how we would embark in something similar?
Well, I guess, yeah, that's a really good question. And I you know, there's a lot of commonalities, you know, like if you're adopted, B, you're female, but most importantly, that's just an aside, is that we're human and we're here, and we've all got our issues, our problematic spots and whatever, which are the jewels that help us move forward. But quite often we stay stuck in being a victim. And that can go on for long periods of time, until something or someone or whatever comes along, or we start to search for answers, because we know maybe possibly we've been in a sense of, you know, happiness, or that life's had moments of glimpses of greatness. So therefore you start to look for answers. But I guess for me, I was always compelled to find answers. I don't expect anyone to be like how I am. And with the book, and that's not a good or a bad thing, that's not a separation there. It's just that is to honour the individuality. So therefore that person there and there needs to be like me. Not at all. It's more that what I've done in my book is to really be more about here's a template, and how you answer, and how that with what I have suggested is a good way to start working on yourself personally. So, but I mean, the reason why I did that was basically so that I could because I was looking for answers to trust my path. I knew that as much as the upbringing that I'd had was a fantastic upbringing, I was so lucky to have had that upbringing, but I didn't feel like I fit. I didn't fit there. So I'm not sure what's going on.
Are you still?
I'm still recording.
Okay, you're back.
Yeah, it's still recording.
Okay,
So,
okay, go ahead.
Okay, so where was I up to?
So yes, you were saying that you were very fortunate to have had the upbringing, but you felt you never fit.
Yeah, well, that's right. So I was compelled to look for answers along the way, and felt compelled to that I knew that there was a sense of feeling good within me from time to time, and I knew that I wasn't necessarily that I knew that there was some humbling opportunities to find myself, to be able, because I knew that I was basically an okay person, not that ego, look at me that aspect, but I knew that I was capable of helping people, or being kind and generous. So whereas there was a lot of I'm not sure why this keeps doing this.
It was just temporary again.
Yeah. So looking for the answers that needed to. So I was always compelled to look for answers, and so one way was through talking with other people. The other way is through meditation. I can't see you.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I'm not sure where you're going.
So tell me a little bit more about that creative path.
There you are.
Yes. Did you hear that question?
Yeah, the creative path. Well, that started as a teenager in my bedroom, as most things do start. As a youngster, I felt compelled to write. It wasn't there. I wasn't sitting there going, now, Angela, you need to write something down to make yourself feel better. Oh, my God. I was sitting there smoking cigarettes, feeling miserable, cooped up in my bedroom, that I had made quite a monument to lots of posters and, had it all decked out like as my room to feel sacred. It was my sacred space. And so I would sit there feeling quite often, in a dreaded space. Then I would write. I just felt compelled to write, like the mandalas. I felt compelled to draw them. But I hadn't come across necessarily mandalas at that stage, although I was drawn to circles. I didn't know what a mandala was until much later in life. But at the end of the writing that I would do, which was quite often about misery, how other people pissed me off, all of that sort of thing. And it was like, I was whinging and complaining, and how indignant life could be and blah, blah, blah. Then at the end, I would just find myself on the side piece of the paper or another piece of paper, it was automatic. Just start to draw, doodle something, that's that sort of thing. But then I would feel really, really good, like quite elated, noticeably different than the way I had felt, which was misery, pain and suffering. That was like this feeling all encompassing, and so whereas now I was feeling uplifted and feeling really good, and then guilty that I'd written what I'd written. So that was where I started my creative journey. So I would say, being an artist wasn't from standing there drawing pictures of still lives or, whatever, feeling compelled to draw the apple, or which is still life, or a person, or whatever it was. I didn't feel compelled to do, although later I did, that's for sure. But it was more coming from that therapeutic, I don't know, that wanting to up level, or that wanting to make changes. So, you know, looking and searching that for the more, and the mystical, you know, I was interested in, while we do the things we do. I got into, like, I didn't get into oracle cards for many, many years. It was more the I Ching that I got into first up. Not that I could make an awful lot of sense of what it was saying. I didn't really understand a lot of it, but that was a bit of a companion too. But so I, you know, the writing and the drawing went on for a long time. Sorry?
So looking back, do you see how your creative path led to the transpersonal work that you eventually came to do later in life? That's
a definite yes. And two, because I didn't go and study the transpersonal art therapy until I was in my, till I was about 40, I think, 39, 40. So that's quite later in life, but it was perfect timing. I'd gone on to study the visual arts, not until I was in my mid-20s. I didn't do the leave school, go to uni thing. I was quite rebellious, get me the heck out of here. I want to go away. I want to run away. I was right into get me out of here type thing, traveling around. And then I went and studied at 25 to be a visual artist, because I wanted to understand more of the mediums that I was using to be able to, to understand a bit more of the history, etc., etc. So then I got sick of all it felt to me like quite a facade. Going to a gallery, and this is not poo-pooing galleries, because galleries are great, have the paintings on the wall, sell the paintings, yada yada. But to me, it didn't mean anything. In the end, it didn't mean anything, and you may or may not sell. Everybody else was doing quite well. The gallery, the photographer, the framer, whatever, they were all getting paid for it, but I may or may not. It was always like quite questionable. In fact, my whole life's been quite questionable in a lot of ways. There was never any guarantees. And I just felt it was quite a farcical in a lot of ways. You know, I felt that I was hanging around a lot of people that I couldn't relate to. I was just looking at other versions of myself. That's not a poo-poo against people who go to galleries, because I love going to galleries, you know. But I was at a very insecure time of my life, where I knew that I had to find a new path. So I didn't know what that was, and I've got used to being in a lot of that I don't know. So what I just started to question, okay, say what do I want to do? Well, I'm interested in psychology, and I thought, well, I'm not really interested in going to university. And I'd gone, you know, a long way into the more metaphysical, the mystical aspects of life. I thought being cooped up in a university doing psychology, I just wasn't quite ready. It was too straight and in a box for me. I find it very interesting. I find that very interesting, but it was more that why we do the things that we do. So then I'm just leading to something. So just hang on a second. So I ended up still not knowing what that was. But then a few days later, I started to go, okay, so it's got to be something created. I'm interested in mental health, why we do the things we do, or more, I wouldn't say necessarily mental health, and I wouldn't have put it as the words mental health. That sounds a bit clinical to me. All right. Why did I do the things that I did? Why do we do the things we do? I was questioning life. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was an existential crisis, although that does come under that banner, I would say. But then I went to a gallery one day and I saw this, we started chatting with this lady because we were doing a swap over. I had been sitting there for a few hours. She was then going to do another couple of hours, and then whatever was going on. But we got on like a house on fire. We started chatting, and she started talking about the transpersonal art therapy. So I remember feeling really warm and fuzzy about it, like really excited about the whole thing about art therapy, the transpersonal art therapy. But then I thought, well, you know, it's Adelaide. Why would that be here in Adelaide? So I ended up leaving there feeling quite excited about it, but letting it go, because why would it be in Adelaide? Yeah, maybe London, New York, or wherever, but not here. It seemed too out of the box for Adelaide. Anyway, within a couple of weeks, I was sitting down at a cafe or something, and flicking through a free magazine called the Adelaide Review, and came across transpersonal art therapy intake for whatever year it was, 2000 or whatever it was, and away I went. I knew it instantly that was what it was. And then, like a few weeks later, I started it, and the day one, from that moment, I knew that I'd arrived. I was actually now learning what I'd been doing in my bedroom at home, writing the crappy stuff or the feelings or the insights or whatever it might be, and then drawing as a means of segueing into the healing aspect. It was then transforming what I had written. So I knew I'd landed. I was now intellectualizing it. I was now learning it to eventually then let it go. So that it was an experiential course that went for a couple of years or so, that I ended up. So, you know, you go through all the processes, okay, so that when you go through the processes, whatever you've taken your clients through, you have gone through yourself, all right? So you can tune into what's going on within, with the here and now, with what's happening with the client, as to which process or what can be looked at, rather than, you know, necessarily saying that this and this is exactly what I need to do next. Well, it might not be that way. So we've got to let go of trying to control anything that's going on. You know, it really helps you to be in the here and now. So that was a pretty long-winded answer to your question, and I'm not sure if I entirely answered it.
No, it's very interesting. I was just going to ask you, looking back now and having that perspective, how do you feel that the weaving from the creative part of self coming out, then merging into the transpersonal work, and then eventually, you know, you're bringing it to your therapeutic work, and your spirituality? How do you see that all weaving through, and what insights do you have on that?
Well, I guess the transpersonal art therapy is psycho-spiritual work. It is taking us up into the bigger picture. So, you know, I'd say that I went from, there was a part of me that has always looked for answers. And I did the more material world answer, because that's what you do, is what I thought, you know. But there was always something leading me on what I call the I don't know, was really leading me through to another path, because this more material side of life, it didn't matter which way I tried it, it didn't seem to work. Even the get married, have kids thing. None of it seemed to line up. None. So I had to go off on a different tangent. It didn't matter how I tried to line up that way of what life or what the mainstream society was. I was always being drawn back to a more solitary sense of existence, to express, to work through the things that I needed to go through, to do the work that I went through to do the work that I do now, which was going back to the original, what would we say, wound, or, you know, through being adopted, to to not feeling like I fitted, to spending many years traversing different paths, looking for basically myself. Like if I hadn't have done that, maybe I'd probably own 4 or 5 houses by now, or whatever it might be, and stayed in that one spot. But I would have stayed, if I'd stayed in that one spot, I would have been still drinking and smoking and being really toxic and, there's still whispers of that if I go back to that original home, but, town, the toxic aspects are still there. So I have to be really careful when I go back into that. But it all led to the transpersonal artwork, that leads on to a much bigger picture. Like I'm going down some pretty amazing rabbit holes at the moment. Like you are with your work. You're creative. You've got the artwork going. And especially the abstract, rather than being something that's a still life that you have to draw perfectly. You get so in your head and whatever. Whereas when you go into the drawing and the painting, whatever, you really open up to the more mystical states, that sense of going into, samadhi, or the, like you can have profound states of ecstatic states.
For me, it's like touching into the subconscious, right? You're touching into something greater, as the subconscious, that is the greater part of the soul.
Well, that's all this work is the unconscious, the subconscious. It's not, and all this work helps us to be right here, right now. But if we don't do this work, then we're here right now, but wafting off into past and future and fears and anxieties and whatever, and being stuck in that more material world. So that's where it is. It's that's the way that it is. The unconscious, the subconscious work. If you don't do the work on yourself, well, then you're a product of society, a product of what your parents suggest that you should be. Society says, etc., etc. So, for some people, that's okay. That's their path. Well, great. In a lot of ways, it would have been a whole lot easier just to grow up, go to school, get married, have kids, live happily ever after. That's it. Stay in the one place. It would have been a whole lot easier, possibly. But when you make the journey, sorry.
I find it inspiring. Yes, I find it quite inspiring that you talk about your path, because I think that applies to all of us. Sure, there's the obvious path that, people can take, almost like template paths that say, one should do things in order, things in, go to school, go to university, find a mate, have a family, buy a home. But that's not our personal path. Our personal path requires a little bit more forethought and soul searching. And that's what I loved about your book, is that, you give us the opportunity to delve into how you found your path. And then, you're creating or inviting us to do some self-discoveries through a form of art therapy in using the mandalas as a template. And I find that quite inspiring.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, and I think what you say is really important there, is that, if a couple can be together without being chronically codependent, and that where they have to crash and burn through their addictions and whatever it might be to get past the codependent nature of being in a relationship, or the toxic environments, that you can go off and do your own path. But if you hang on a sec, I'm getting mixed up with that. If you're in a relationship, it's all about, getting past the codependence and the neediness, then it's a difficult path, all right? So, but as it can be alone, but the thing is, you can actually if you can be interdependent and do your own paths in a relationship, you don't have to be alone to do what I've done, sort of thing. For me, it was a prerequisite to be alone. I needed that. I learned isolation or isolating, but in a more healthy and unhealthy ways from a very young person on the land that I was brought up on. You know, I learned to be alone from a young age. So that set the pace for the last, you know, especially the last 20 years of being alone. So that you utilise that time in as a, for the want of a better word, healing or transforming, or, you know, sitting still, being still. Like a few days after Christmas, it was nice to not even really have anything as I'm driving back to Adelaide. Nice not to, which takes 4.5 hours. Nice not to talk to anybody, to really sit in where it would have been pain and suffering and running over the stories of, oh my God, the negativeness. It was really being with myself and being gentle with myself in managing the weekend, the few days that I'd had over there, which was great. But, you know, it was learning to put in boundaries, knowing that I don't really fit there anymore, but I can go in and, you know, say hello and, you know, mix, but not getting tangled. See, I would have acted out in relationships. I would, as a means of doing what was imposed upon, but have to be in a relationship or have to be in this environment. So my way of coping was to drink and smoke, you know, or take myself, because I didn't fit. Whereas now, although, you know, the smoking cigarettes can be a problem, you know, occasionally, but any of the drug taking or alcohol and whatever, that's not that I don't have a problem with that anymore. You know, like I don't do any of that. I don't feel compelled to do anything like that anymore, which is really great. So, but if you can you can find a healthy relationship, or you're lucky enough. Oh no, I wouldn't say lucky enough, because all that we're in are great paths that we're going down. So, but if you are in a relationship that you can really work together and own your shit, so to speak, and get on with your life, that interdependence, well, then you're in a much better position, you know, and that would be great. But, you know, to be in a relationship because of being needy or fix me up, or, you know, that chronically codependent enmeshed relationship, there's, you know, oh my God, what a nightmare. And they can take a long time to really shift through, but they are a very valid pathway to finding self as well. But once you leave them, then there is a period of time that you've got to go through of releasing that. Firstly, coming out of denial that this has been going on, and then, you know, whatever else that goes with the path that they've chosen. But whatever path, you know, this is a template for, as you say, for helping us on that journey. Yes, go and see a therapist or a counsellor or whatever. That's all valid, like drinking water, eating food, doing yoga, meditating daily, all of that sort of thing. So is doing personal journey work. So is going to a therapist. Sometimes we need to do an acute body of work with a therapist, and other times it's like you're good to go. You've got some ongoing personal journey work that you can do through a book like mine, which is great. You can either, you know, trip along the surface, or you can go quite deep. But, you know, basically, if you go past, you know, some people go to, I don't want to do the writing. Sorry? You're going to say something?
No, I was just going to stop you there, because, you know, we're coming back to the book, and that's an important part that I'd like to discuss with you today. I think that, you know, given that you gave us such a wonderful idea of how you actually came through this long journey, this long inner journey as well, that you explained, that led to the most recent book that you've written. And I think I probably missed giving the title, but it's called Creating Wisdom and Magic in Life and Love. There you go.
So there it is.
Hold it nicely so that we can see that mandala. And Angela, tell us about, like, what we are going to find as the reader, as we come in to the book, I know that you've split it up in segments purposely so that, you know, we can read it in a way that makes sense. And then at the end, you offer us some opportunities to actually create ourselves, which as an artist, and I think that you don't, you know, the way you explain it so well, it's not about being a visual artist, it's about expression.
Yeah,
and that you don't need any particular talent to do the mandala.
Yeah. Like, as I said, I went on to learn how to draw. It wasn't necessarily a natural thing for me, but I felt compelled to draw, you know. and two, I didn't believe, you know, I knew I was an artist, but I didn't believe I was an artist. So that part in me that was in the pain and suffering didn't believe that I could draw and whatever. So when, after going to art school and then going and doing the art therapy, oh my gosh, it was so great to realise that the art therapy was not about, it was about unlearning. It was about not drawing. It was about just like, you know, just moving objects around on a table or throwing sand around or whatever is art therapy. You know, sand trays, moving sand around, that's therapy. But like in my book, the first aspect is just a part of my journey, not all the nuts and bolts, because that would be too long-winded and whatever. And then I go into talking about the work that I've done as a therapist and why I feel that it's important for us to drop into doing some therapy or personal journey work. Or for want of a better phrase, without it sounding too clinical, do you know what I mean? Because it's like I'm having a moment, what can I do? Well, maybe if I, you know, go to the book and maybe I need to do a little bit of journaling on something. And this is where I was just about to say something before, was that some people will get caught up in, I don't want to write. Again, it's like the drawing. It's not about being a literary, you know, writer. You know, it's about jotting down ideas or feelings. So rather than being stuck in your head, you're now writing it out. If it stays in there, that's where it's staying. But if you start to, it's like a hologram. You start to get it out onto the paper. It starts to shape shift. Then you go and then you begin to draw. Then it takes it to another level. It's almost like the icing on a cake. Then it transports you. You can go into altered states of consciousness, in that dreamy state, that more alpha state of where ecstatic states can occur. Not every time, they can occur for moments. That really segues us into the healing. Now, I've chosen mandalas because I've got a penchant, a thing for mandalas. I love them. So, and I guess we could look at it as a container, but you can go outside of the container if you're not compelled to stay in that container. I would also say that, so there are 12 processes. One, and the last one is more where you gather items. You could do that in a group, or you could do all of them in a group, but, you know, do your own work first. You could do steps. There are 12 processes. You could do, I would say, do the 1, 2, 3, 4, all incrementally to the number 12, and then mix it up as you feel compelled to. It doesn't mean you need to spend weeks or months, or you might spend weeks or months. You might spend a day, a morning, a week. It's learning to be guided by yourself. It's learning to trust yourself. This is a guidebook. It's not about doing it right or wrong, good or bad. But sometimes we have to sit in that and even get upset, cry about, oh my God, I can't do this, or whatever it might be, to go past it, sit in the silence that becomes quite loud after shedding of tears, which is not about really doing the work. It's that this, whatever was inside, has started to come up. You know, it's sitting there just under the surface wanting to come up. So there's the 12 processes. And that, as I said, is something that you could be using for the rest of your life. You know, they're ongoing processes. And it would be worth, you have a journal, taking and keeping dates and stuff. Not that you're necessarily going to go back to them, but you might at one stage, what did I do? I wonder when that was. It could be quite relevant in watching the synchronicities, synchronous moments that might have occurred over a period of time, maybe. Anyway, whatever. Some people don't want to record. That's okay. Sorry?
You've piqued my interest, my curiosity. We talked about you could do this. I mean, obviously, this is work that can be done alone, obviously, because of the way you've written the book. You've given us all the information. It's a natural thought that, you would want to do this in your own space. And but what do you feel about individuals wanting to regroup with friends to do this together?
Sure.
How do you feel about that?
That's a good idea. But look, seriously, if you are having a bit of a tough time, and, if you go into, a safe space, and provided it's not codependent, that someone's trying to rescue or fix you up, all right? The point of this work is it is your own work. So when someone starts to project their ideals or stop you doing this or whatever, well, then it becomes about that. Now, so if a group can be there to witness you without projecting their ideals onto you, well, then it's, I would say, a much more conducive state for, where things need to be. Or not need to be, but that could be. If a person's having, it's a lot of stuff going on and you feel a little bit opened up or a bit fragile, well, then I would go and get somebody that you can work with as a counsellor. Your body will only go to where it needs to be going. Like if we cut ourselves accidentally, our body wants to heal. It's the same with this. The work with this book is it helps us to heal. We automatically want to go back into homeostasis. So I would say, yes, it is good for group work, but it's not, it could be, but initially it might well be quite intense, quite emotional. So before it goes to the giddy states and whatever, I'm not poo-pooing that. I just would say this is a book to coming home to you. When you can segue that into being with a group where you're actually okay in doing the work, where it can be more group oriented, where you're not going to go into trying to control each other's outcome, well, then that's a much better way of looking at it, I would say. But as you say, that last piece in particular can be done with a group, and I've done it several times with a lot of groups. I've nearly, 270 odd workshops over the last 10 or so years, 15 years. And so there's a lot of, so this one lends itself to being with the group, because each person, after the few weeks of doing workshops, this is the final piece. This is the finale. So where they can bring each their individual aspects to it, but then as a community build this project together. But it's an organic piece. What are we doing? Don't know. So quite often the initial aspect is it can be a little bit controlling until each person just goes, well, let's just do whatever, And some groups are really, they segment this mandala off. This is my spot. And other groups will just perfectly meld together. Others where there's 2 or 3 who are leading it and the other ones sit back. It's quite interesting. Every group is dynamic. So, because it brings up people's emotion. It's very emotive work. Now, some people might go, well, that's why I'm not doing it. Well, life is emotive. And if you keep shoving it down at some stage, it's going to come up. That's why we go into our addictions: overeating, over drinking, over sexing, overthinking, overworking, whatever. Gambling and smoking and drinking, they don't look so good. Whereas overworking looks good, looks impressive, but it's just as toxic as the other. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting. So like it's a fine line, but sometimes we have to go into those shadow controlling and projecting our stuff onto other people, then projecting it onto us. We need to experience those for us to get that doesn't make me feel good. That isn't good. No, I don't know if that really sits well with me, or the hell was going on there. There's a whole lot of other stuff that goes on in the unseen world around us when those things happen. But, you know, that's a part of our journey. I wouldn't say avoid it, but you're learning to come home to you first and foremost. So then the book, there's a little bit of poetry that I've written over the years, whatever, that's the next aspect after the processes. And then there are the 54 mandalas. I'm actually now up to the fifth, drawing the 56th mandala, and the 55th is not in there. But the 54 mandalas started 10 years ago, and each one, as I said, right to that first original piece of paper that I was given. So little did I know that was going to be the journey that it was. But if I sat back in trying to work things out and blah, 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 you know, who knows what that would have been. This is about this piece of paper that was given to me. I'm going to do this. You know, 10 or so years later, it's like, look at that. You know, I didn't sit there and dot point what I think I should do. This was going back into that, let the life just unfold. Let it just unfold. So, and for many years, it became, instead of each drawing, me dialoguing with each one, and it being as like with painting, going out there and taking the photographs, or doing the painting in situ, or whatever it might be, it became a yearly dialogue. So for that year, I noticed the energy was, instead of doing a piece on each one individually, that's how it went. And it went like that for many years. And each one of those, the yearly thing is actually on my website. So, and it's actually also in the book as well. So it tells you what I found with this particular year. Some years I did a lot. Some years I only did 2 or 3. It's kind of strange how that works. Sometimes I sit with the drawings for long periods of time. The paper, the drawings invite me. I don't go, the moment that I try and project or do a little thumbnail sketch, or maybe I should do this, it's like, no. It's not like that, but it's weight. It's almost like it has to be treated with reverence. And when it's ready, I then go into the next aspect, which is great. It really is an I don't know. And then at some stage, so the last 2 or 3 years is when I started, they became an oracle. Okay, so and I would have never known that originally, but I would say, looking back, that all of my artwork, like this, you know, is like, as soon as I started drawing roads again, I knew I was on the road. Or if I was in the middle of the city or living near the hills or where it was, and I'd start just spontaneously drawing oceans, within a very short time, I'm living at the ocean. But I didn't know that, really. This is in hindsight. So they were all like a living oracle.
Okay, so that is very interesting, and I don't want to go too quickly over that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, can you qualify what you mean by oracle and what it was for you?
Well, oracle is a sense of, again, I get drawn into, rather than it being a one flat surface, it then just automatically goes out almost into a hologram. That is that it becomes a meaning. There's a meaning, an inherent meaning in it. It's not a sense of okay, in 6 months you'll be doing this. It's not necessarily like, you don't necessarily know what the outcome will be, but there are certain energies within this within this drawing that it relates to. All right, so you don't want to get too fixed on exactly what it is, but an oracle it's like a divination tool. So and instead of having an oracle deck, with this you just open the deck, and you know then you choose a mandala, you know, and that's the one that's relevant for that day or that week. it's getting into a gentle space, so that you're not doing it from fear, that you're not doing it from a rushed, harried, I need a word. You're not giving the power to this. You're asking for guidance from an aspect of your higher self, for the want of a better description, or the collective, or that universal. These are like universal symbols that we draw upon, that help us, guide us in the next aspect of our journey, whether it be a project or whether it be around a situation, or whatever it might be. There are no reversals at this stage with this. These are all just the one meaning that's overall. But they certainly, and sometimes there are drawings either side of the page. You decide before you open the book, will I be relating to the drawing that opens on the right side of the page or the left side of the page. So it's kind of strange or different to do it within a book, and we could make it a bit of a bloody, no, I keep opening to the same page, or what. It's like, seriously, sometimes we do get the same oracle day after day or whatever. And so, like, what's that telling us? How's that speaking to us? Are we journaling with it? That sort of thing. So these are another tool, like drinking water, eating fruit and vegetables. They're another guidance symbol that helps us in our journey. So it's that sort of thing, okay? And then at the very end of it, I actually wanted these drawings to be one per page, but whatever that means, they ended up 4 on the page, and they're more coaster size. And I thought back to the time when went to art school, and instead of drawing on my little A4 piece of paper or a tiny little piece of paper where I felt quite comfortable on, we had these ginormous pieces of paper, and I remember having this huge thing in the middle of the room that we had to draw, and I didn't understand that we only really had to take a section of the drawing, not with all these boxes with the saucepans on them and the apple sitting at the top and all this other stuff. And I'm going, oh my God, how am I going to fit that on that piece of paper? So I started with this little apple on the top of the paper, and I remember everyone laughing their heads off. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was frightened of having to put all of that information onto that paper, and how was it all going to fit? How could it work it out? Oh my God, what a nightmare that was. Now, so I drew comfort on the fact that, don't you remember when, you were used to drawing on a small piece of paper? And I think, like, these coasters that I've got here, they're like the size of a coaster. So it's quite humbling to, whoops, I just spat on the table then, to draw on on a small, within a small boundary, and just gently bring up those colours, build up the layers, let it be whatever it is. But they work, what you're doing is you're drawing, instead of going to the doctor and getting a prescription from them, you're drawing your own prescription. When you're doing your drawings, that's what your soul, your mind's eye, that's what you need to see. Put your artwork up on the wall or whatever it might be, as a means of the healing, until you're ready to take it down. Some pieces, I'm ready to rip it up straight away, not because it's not aesthetically pleasing, but because I know I've done the work and it needs to be moved on. And other pieces I've had around me for years, and they might be just a little bit of mark making on a piece of paper, but I absolutely adore it. It means
I like that that advice that you give in the book, to after doing the mandala, to exhibit it on your walls so that you can appreciate it, and maybe even have it speak to you as an oracle, if nothing else comes up. And you never know. I know that for myself, I always enjoy looking at my art as it's transforming.
That's exactly what it is. It's doing its work, and it's not only it's invited you to paint it. It then invites other people around who are drawn to it, that it also speaks to them visually. It's a healing tool, but we're not necessarily taught that. That's for there's those people over there, not, actually all of us,
Well, that's right. It's something they don't even teach in art school.
Well, no, it's not. It's still in that material world, which was the world, you know, that I had to move away from. It didn't feel right. I loved doing the paintings, but the rest of what it stood for it annoyed me. It didn't mean anything. It didn't, so whereas this up on your wall is your work. I wouldn't put it in the main hallway or the main dining room so everybody can have their say on it, because that's their stuff. So I would put it somewhere, because you don't realise how raw you're feeling until someone starts going, oh, I know what that is. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, really? You did that? Or whatever they say. You can feel quite, it can be quite full on. So I would be... Yeah, I would be mindful of where you place your work.
Vulnerability. Yeah. But that's what makes it so therapeutic as well.
Exactly. So, how did you get into your art, Marie?
Well, I just had always, from a very young age, a need to express. And as soon as I got my hands on paint, anything that was, able to, I remember my mother giving me shit for taking my wax crayons and writing all over the wallpaper that she had put on in the living room. And being so proud that I had made my mark.
Yeah, you certainly did.
I think it's interesting now that artists talk about marks, it's a personal mark as an artist. It's almost like a signature. It's your personal mark. And being an abstract painter, I'm not at all focused on replicating reality. I'm just looking to express what is within me through color, texture, form.
Exactly.
And I love the process because, as you say, it's the process that leads. It's not me.
Exactly.
It takes a form on its own.
That's it. And that can take quite a while to arrive at, to get out of our head and, get past that, that ego aspect. It can take quite a while. I have watched clients or, people in a workshop, some very difficult situations where people are, in a group of 18 people or 15 people, someone is going to town and, like, I'm not going to do this. Oh, I've done this work before. Oh, I've done all this work before. Or, in great sense of resistance, feeling frightened as all I can do is encourage and be there, make no judgment, because this person is having an extremely difficult time. I know that between this point here and this point here, like reaching over and grabbing the pencil to start drawing or writing can be enormous. It can feel like it's such a chasm in here that I can't do it. But quite often, once, in fact, all of the time, except for one or two times in all the years that I've been doing this work with clients and groups, that once that person has gone through that turmoil, that building up, that they will then go into doing the work. Then you can't stop them. They then go into those ecstatic, altered states. They feel compelled to continue. Then you can't shut them up. They're like, it's the first taste of letting go. It's amazing to see some of their work. And again, it's not about the aesthetically pleasing aspect of and sometimes their work is amazing, sometimes to look at. But that's not the reason why we're doing it. That's not the
real work.
No. So it's like, it's amazing, but I understand that resist. I remember, you know, falling to pieces over a piece of clay that I was working with. You know, I couldn't, in between situations, I couldn't even put this clay down on the floor. You know, I had to put it on my foot because we were sitting on the ground. I couldn't put it on I had to put it on my foot to rest it there while my hands were doing some drawing or whatever it was. I was in tears going through these really deep states of releasing a lot of emotional, whatever it was at the time. And this went on for a long period of time, you know, like the process went on for quite some time. But then over that hour or 2 hours or whatever it was, you know, it eventually it ceases, it takes itself out of that, it evolves, it goes, it transforms, it changes from that depth of, you know, jumping into the chasm, off the cliff, to falling and free falling, and that free fall, learning to let go, and then up, you're uplifted, and then you know, it's like, whew, it's like, it was almost like, what happened?
Yes.
And you didn't even have to have a joint or smoke, drive, drink booze or anything like that to go through that. You've done it yourself.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it can sound complicated, and I don't think that we want to give that impression, because what struck me as important to say about your book, and important for those who are going to read it, and I really recommend it, because you make it simple. You make getting there simple, and it's like one step at a time, and that we don't have to go from I can't do this to, oh, I'm in an ecstatic state.
Exactly.
There is no
that might not ever happen, or it may happen, but we're not. That's not what we're looking for. We are not looking for that. We're looking for it. We're actually not looking for anything. We're processing or going through whatever happens. That's a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
But that, so it's done simply.
It's about getting started.
It needs to be simple. It needs to be simple, not complicated, intellectual. Otherwise, you throw the book against the wall and walk out. You know, it's too much. You know, like our emotions are so intense at times. Let's keep it simple. Let's move past ourselves.
Yeah, I almost want to say, like, leave your thoughts behind and just do the work, right? Just do the work. Leave your thoughts and your critical mind in the closet behind you, lock it up, just do the work, because it's so pleasurable when you don't have that critical mind or thought haunting you as you are just doing the work. And the work is
or you write it down on a piece of, you journal with that, you know, but it will sit alongside you for a while, that critical aspect. It goes on and on and on, and then it's like enough, you know, but you can battle with that on and off for a while, but stay out of the story. And it also too, you know, people feel compelled to fix. So when you share with someone, you might want to say, look, I'll share this with you, but I don't need your opinion or for you to fix that or feel compelled to fix it. This is just my process. This is what I experienced. And, you know, that's all I need to share, you know. So, but I agree.
Yeah,
lock it up in the cupboard, for sure. That's actually a great metaphor. I think that's a good thing. So we're probably, it's 11:11. And so it's probably time to wind up, isn't it? You must be almost ready to.
Yes. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It's very inspirational to see that you've had such an inspiring inner journey, however hard, and it's been along the way. And I think that we can relate, because although we're not you and we have had very different lives, we all have struggles as human beings that need to come to the forefront, work it out, and move through it, right? So you've shown us how to move through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We all go through stuff.
And yes, so thank you. And Always a pleasure speaking with you, Angela.
Yeah, you too.
And
That's great.
look forward to seeing more of your work.
Thank you very much, Marie. I really, really appreciate that. Excellent. All right, so I'll just push this part.